Hello everyone. In this section, I'm going to be creating a custom domain. So to do this, you're going to go to the Microsoft Entra Admin Center. You come to Settings. In the drop-down blade, you have Domain Names. You click on it, and then you click on Add Custom Domain. In the right-hand section, you type the name of the domain you want, and you go to Add Domain. Now it is going to try and validate the domain, but for it to validate, you need to create a TXT. Now to create a TXT, you need to come to your Azure portal. Now in Azure portal, you search for Azure DNS zones. So this is it. You go there and you click on Create. Once you click on Create, you should have something like this. This is the one I created previously. You create it and then you come to record sets. When you come to record set, you click on add record. In the name, you put your directory name or your domain name, or in the name, you could just leave it as at, sorry. You leave that as at. In the type, you select TST. In the TLL, you come back to the portal, you copy the TLL, you paste it, and then the TLL unit, you leave it at hours or days or whatever, and then you go add. Now it has been added. You can see it down here. It has been added. So click on that. Yeah, so that looks good. And now you come back to the Azure portal and you click on verify. Okay, so the reason this error is coming up is because it takes up to 48 hours before these changes can be recorded. The new record we set, it could take up to 24 hours before it is stored in the system. So, but basically that is how you create a custom domain in Azure. And once you verify it and then it saves. Now, another advantage is once you have a custom domain, you can create subdomains. Let's say, for example, my domain is ryan.com. I can create paris.ryan.com or parisryan.com. So I'm creating child domains under the main custom domain. So that's a very big advantage of creating custom domains in the Microsoft Entra Admin Center. So next we'll be looking at how to configure tenant-wide settings in your Azure portal. So you go to your Azure portal, you come to the home. Um, in the Blaze drop down, you come to Active Directory or Entra ID in this case, sorry. So once you're in Entra ID, you come to Properties. And now when you're in Properties, you can edit tenant-wide settings. So basically, tenant-wide settings are settings that reflect across your whole tenant or across your whole directory. So for example, if I change the name in here to that will be the new tenant name. You could change the notification language depending on your location. You could change the technical contact is automatically the contact of the person who created the domain. And then the global privacy contact is, for example, if there's a data breach or there's something like that, the contact of your legal team, so Microsoft can get in touch with them. That's the contact you provide in the global privacy settings. And then privacy statement, you can put the URL for your privacy statement, your terms and conditions. So all of your users, or if you're hosting an application on your in your domain, your users will be able to see your terms and conditions and accept them. So you can put the URL to that. Your legal team will prepare it, and then you put the URL for that. So this is usually set to no by default. But if you want the global admin for the Entra directory to also have access to all Azure subscription and management group in the entire tenant, then you can switch it to on. So that is like elevated access. It is a global admin for the user access, and also a global admin to manage all subscription and management group for the main Azure portal. So there are security defaults. Basically, security defaults are settings that come by default. Security settings that are created by default. There are security settings for users, for groups, for even guest users. So that's like the baseline, as well as trying to make sure that uh, off the out of the box, every object you are creating, there is a security parameters to it, so they don't just have full access within your tenant. So once you're done, you simply click save, and it is successfully updated across your tenants. The other part you can look into, for example, let's say we click on security default, it is enabled by recommendation. Now to see what the security defaults are for users, for example, you scroll up, click on users, and then you click on user settings. Now all of these are the security defaults for user settings. Now, user can register application. It is not ideal to allow every user in your domain or in your directory to be able to register applications. So this by default you turn it off, and then you create a custom policy that allows specific user that you grant access to be application owner or application registrar. You grant them that permission. So user can create security groups. Nope. User should not be allowed to create security groups. So I'm turning that off. And then there are guest user settings. For example, guest user have the same access as members. That is not a security best practice, so it's good to leave it as off. Then the next one is guest users have limited access to properties and membership of directory object. Yes, that's good. Guest user access is restricted to properties and membership of their own directory object. I mean, this is relative to what function you want the guest user to perform in your directory. So if it is like a collaboration, then you want to give them access to certain objects and certain resources so they can perform their function. So you leave it at this, or you either leave this on or off. So show keep user signed in is just a tick icon that shows on the user's profile to show that they are signed in. So going into um, external identities, external collaboration settings. Now, when you look here, it allows you to even fine grain the assets that guest users have, which is external collaboration users, the assets they have within your directory. So you can see guest user access restriction. So you specify guest user have the same access. We read this earlier. It's good. Guest user invite settings. Anyone in the organization can invite guest users, including guests and non-admin. This is not ideal. Members, users and users assigned to specific admin roles can invite guest users, including guests with members' permission. Only users assigned to specific admin roles can invite guest users. No one in the organization can invite guest users. So I prefer this because we don't want guest users to simply invite themselves into the directory. So we leave it at this. Enable guest self-service sign up via user flow. So this is basically where the guest user can sign up, create an account in your directory with an application. So it reduces administrative overhead. So it is really good to enable this. And when you scroll down, so also you can verify if you want guest users to leave themselves, to remove themselves from your directory. So that's good. Then collaboration restrictions, cross-tenant access settings are also evaluated when sending an invitation to determine whether the invite should be allowed or blocked. So allow invitation to be sent to any domain. That is irrespective of the domain that the guest user is using, you can send invites to them. So secondly, deny invitation to specified domains. So when you click on this, you will be able to specify. You have a drop down where you can specify what your target domains are. And then allow invitation only to specified domain also allows you to specify what the target domain is. But this is good. And then you save it at the top. So basically, you've updated your external collaboration settings. So looking into external identities, basically this is an identity that is not created within your directory in your Microsoft Entra environment. So for example, when you want to specify some configuration for an external identity, but in another Microsoft Entra tenant, not your own tenant, but a different tenant, a different organization that also uses Microsoft Entra. So you can use organizational settings. You add the organization and then you do the configuration. So there are some default settings that you can specify, the inbound and outbound. In a situation like this, you configure it both in your own end and in the end of the other user. I'll be making a video into this more in depth, but just showing that. And then there are other identity providers like this is inbuilt. These ones are inbuilt. But you can also use Google and Facebook as identity providers. And then you can use custom identity providers. For example, you can add a specific identity provider and all of that for your external identity verification. And then external collaboration settings, you can specify the same way we specify um, guest user settings. So you can also do all of that, and then you can configure self-service sign up. So custom user attributes you can specify. If you want other things, you can add it on this side. Maybe you want to use the age. Age is not listed here. You can specify age and all of that to use as a self-service sign up. And then you can use custom authentication extensions, and you can also configure user flows. This is the most common. You can use user flows, so you specify the name, you specify what identity provider you want to use, you specify what attribute, and automatically when you invite a guest user for collaboration or any of that, they will be able to use this flow to create their own account, and that basically limits overhead. So briefly, I'll talk about company branding. So company branding is basically a service in Azure that allows you to customize the way user view you, the user interface when they're trying to access your resources or trying to log in into your domain. You can you can customize a default sign-in experience where you specify the image in the background. You can specify the picture, like the color of the background and all of that, the layout. You can do full screen, partial screen. You can specify the header, the footer, even the sign-in form. You can specify how it looks, the logo, and all of that. So basically, when users or um, identities in your directory when they are trying to log in, it feels customized, it feels more relatable to them because all of the image they are seeing looks familiar and it registers to them. So another part of custom branding is you can customize the browser language. Let's say for example, you can customize the browser in the sense that when the user is trying to log in from Microsoft Edge, and the IP is from Poland or from Austria, automatically the sign-in page will request if the user wants to view the sign-in page in Polish, in Austria, or maybe it's in English. So basically, it's a very, very useful customization tool, and it's just something you play around with to promote your company brand. So briefly, I'm going to talk about authentication method. To do that, you come to your Entra Blade from the Azure portal. You click on security and then you click on manage authentication method. Now, these are the built-in authentication method by Microsoft Entra. We have the pass key, which is FIDO2 key. It's basically like a USB device that you use to verify. It is very, very useful in an environment where they don't allow mobile phones or outside internet connection or any other device. So this is zero internet friendly. And then you have the Microsoft Authenticator app. It is very, very secure, but then you have to have your phone, and then there's SMS, and there's lots more email, OTP, hardware, OAuth token, and third-party software tokens. There's so many options to choose from. For those of us that are still using password, you can specify just like in the local directory. That's Active Directory Domain Service. You can specify the lockout threshold. You can specify the lockout duration. That is, lockout threshold is the amount of incorrect inputs that the person can do before they are logged out. And then the lockout duration is the number of minutes that the person is logged out from. So when they are logged out, when they try again and they miss it, then the duration gets longer and longer. So it is really useful for brute force attacks. And then you can create some custom band password list, and then you can enable password protection for your Active Directory. For example, if you have a domain, if you have a Entra Connect, an hybrid environment, you can specify this, and then the password protection that you specify here is also going to reflect in your local directory. And then you can either enforce it or audit it. Basically, enforcing it means that it is running immediately, while audit means that you can still review it and give some time to do all of that. Also, you can specify the authentication strength depending on which policy you select. You can specify the authentication strength and all of those settings. So next, I would like to talk about password resets. You have that in the overview blade of your Microsoft Entra ID. You click on password reset, and the first thing you have is self-service password reset enabled. This is really good. when you want to reduce administrative overhead. So basically, your users are not creating tickets all the time, telling you that their password is forgotten or they are locked out of their password and all of that. So you can either activate it for selected and you select some group, or you can activate it for all users in your directory and you save that. So that's that. Also, the authentication method blade that we were referring to earlier, you can select the number of authentication method required. That is MFA, multi-factor authentication. So if you want one authentication method, you leave that. If you want it as two, that is two-factor authentication, you can leave that. And then you choose which one you want. You either choose email, mobile phone, depending on the situation. You select what you want, and then when you create a new user, you can basically request that the user sign in for multi-factor authentication when they are creating their account. So you see at the top, designate whether unregistered users are prompted to register their own authentication information when they sign in for the first time. If it's set to no, administrator must manually specify the necessary password reset authentication. So this is basically like when a user is logging in for the first time, they need to reset their password and things like that. So you can leave it on and all of that. And then there's the notification, notify user on password reset, notify all admins when other admin reset their password. This is really good. You save it. And then there is customization settings. You can just play around with it. And then on-premise integration, when you have an hybrid environment, this is very useful. You just need all the right agents to be running perfectly. And then there's the administrator policy. That is self-service password reset. Basically, um, a review of everything that you set under the password reset setting. So next I'll be talking about named location. Basically, named location is a policy that you can add to your conditional access policy to ensure that a user signing in from a specific location is either trusted or not trusted. So it will tell the system if that should be flagged as a security risk or if that access should be blocked or any of that. So to do that, you come to your Entra portal overview, you come to setting security, and here you have named location. So you can choose the country you want, or you choose the IP address range, or you configure. So once you choose the location, you can choose multiple location and add them into one group. And then you can determine the location by either IP address or by a GPS coordinate. And then you simply name it trusted, or let's say not trusted, or no access and access, depending on what you want. And then you can also specify by IP ranges. Once you have chosen trusted locations or trusted IP, you can configure multi-factor authentication for it. So then, let's say you have a remote worker that you employ to work only in the United States, or you employ to work only within the EU, and the remote worker is working from um, United Kingdom, for example, which is currently not part of the EU, but you have added the United Kingdom as a trusted location. Then you configure multi-factor authentication just to give you another a second layer of security to be sure that this person logging in from the United Kingdom is indeed your remote worker. So basically that is it about named locations.